Okay, so this week, you all sent in a bunch of sources, and they're all about, well, something that at first glance seems pretty straightforward, how notebooks are bound.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But as we dug into all the stuff you sent, it became super clear that this is more than just, slapping some paper together.
Mhm.
It really affects how a notebook feels in your hand, how it works, even the kind of vibe it gives off.
Yeah, like the way it opens, how long it lasts, all of that. Who knew binding was so important?
Right. And what's really interesting is the range of sources you sent. You've got everything from super practical guides to design-focused articles, even some historical stuff.
It's true. And for our listeners, you guys are always looking for those aha moments, those insights that make everything click. We thought, why not dive into something we all use, but probably never really think about?
Exactly. It's one of those things that once you understand it, it kind of changes how you see things. So today we're going to break down those 5 common binding methods, all those sources laid out.
We'll look at what each one does well, where it falls short, and when you might pick one over the other.
By the end, you'll be able to choose the right notebook for your needs, whether it's a journal for yourself, a gift for a friend, or, just because you're curious.
So you sent us some material that emphasizes this from the start, that binding isn't just about holding paper together. It impacts how you experience the notebook itself.
Totally. And before we even jump into specific types, there are some key questions those sources brought up,
Yeah.
to really get us thinking about what the notebook is for.
Like, what are you going to use it for? Quick notes, journaling, art projects, or even something else.
Right. And then there's how thick the notebook is going to be, because some bindings can handle more pages than others.
I've definitely struggled with those super thick soft covers that just won't lay flat.
Ugh, yeah. And speaking of laying flat, that's another big one. If you're writing a lot or sketching, that's super important.
Totally. And your sources also talk about things like whether you need to remove or rearrange pages, what your budget is, even the look you're going for, like modern, fancy, handmade.
Exactly. So many things to consider. But don't worry, that's why we're here. Let's dive into those 5 main binding methods. First up is spiral or coil binding, probably the one most people think of.
Yeah, the classic notebook. So those sources explain that this is where holes are punched along the spine and a metal or plastic coil is used to hold the pages.
And there are actually different types within this one method, which I thought was cool.
Like metal coils, those can be double or single loop.
Yeah, double loop is usually stronger, less likely to bend. Then there's covered wire, which looks more, professional but still flexible.
Mm,
And of course, the plastic coils, super light and cheap.
right. And the big win for spiral binding is that it lets you turn the pages all the way around 360 degrees and lay it completely flat.
Makes it super practical for a lot of things. And those sources point out it's easy to tear pages out cleanly, too, if you need to. Think about your classic sketch pad or a student's notebook.
Definitely. And that lay flat feature just makes it so much easier to use for things like brainstorming or drawing across 2 pages.
Totally.
Ah,
But of course, no binding is perfect. The sources do mention some drawbacks, like those coils can bend, especially the plastic ones,
yeah, and it might not be the most elegant look compared to some others, but hey, it's functional. All right, let's move on to case binding.
aka hardcover. This is the one for those who want a notebook that can take a beating.
This is where things get really interesting. We're talking about those notebooks that are built to last.
So those sources describe it as a more complex process. The pages are actually sewn together in sections, little booklets almost, before being glued together and put inside that hardcover.
And you often see fancy touches like end papers and ribbons and case-bound notebooks. It's like a whole different level of craftsmanship.
It's definitely about that premium feel. And the benefits are clear, it's durable, it's high quality, and surprisingly, those sources say it can lay relatively flat, which you wouldn't expect from a hardcover.
Right. Perfect for those special journals or, if you want to give a really impressive gift.
But of course, there's a trade-off. The sources mention that it costs more to make and takes longer. Plus, it's heavier and more expensive to ship. So, things to consider.
Next up, we have perfect binding. This is what we usually see on paperback books, right?
Yep, think textbooks and novels. It's where the pages are glued directly to the spine with strong adhesive. And those sources specifically talk about PUR adhesive, which is supposed to be a lot better than older types of glue.
So that's how they get that clean, flat spine, which does look really nice, especially if you're putting it on a shelf.
Absolutely. And it's a good option if you need a lot of pages, like for workbooks or journals. Plus, it's cheaper than hardcover.
But the downside, and the sources are pretty clear on this, is that they don't lay flat easily, which can be a pain.
Yeah, I've definitely had those moments trying to write in a book that keeps snapping shut.
Totally. And they're also generally less durable than sewn bindings.
Right. That glue, even the good stuff, can weaken over time, especially if you're always forcing it open.
Okay, onto something a little different. Center sewn binding. This one sounds almost like, old school bookmaking.
It kind of is. It's where the pages are stitched together down the spine, and you can often see the thread on the outside.
So it's got that handmade, unique look.
Exactly. And what's really neat is that it lets the notebook lay completely flat, even though it's sewn.
That's a big win, especially for art journals or anything where you need to use both pages without the spine getting in the way.
Right. And the sources talk about how durable it is and how you can customize it with different thread colors and stuff.
Yeah.
It's definitely a more, specialty kind of binding.
But the downside is it usually costs more than those glue-based bindings, and it takes longer to make because it's all done by hand.
Totally. Trade-offs, trade-offs.
All right, last but not least, loose leaf binding. This one's all about flexibility, right?
Absolutely. Think disc-bound notebooks, ring binders, anything where you can add, remove, or rearrange pages.
So useful for planners, those notebooks that are designed to be refilled, or if you're working on a project where things are always changing.
It's all about customization.
Yeah.
And what's cool is that the pages usually lay pretty flat and can turn all the way around, just like spiral binding.
But those sources point out that it might not be the most, stylish option.
Yeah, and those discs and clips can make it a bit bulky.
It's definitely more about practicality than looks.
Form follows function.
Right. So we've looked at these 5 methods, and it's really clear that there's a lot of thought and design that goes into something as simple as how a notebook is bound.
Oh, for sure. And those sources also talk about the materials themselves, like the paper, the cover, the thread, even the glue. All of it makes a difference.
Yeah, like they mentioned PUR adhesive being more durable than those older hot melt glues. And in hardcover binding, those end papers and the mull, that extra reinforcement, it all adds up. It's like they're not just thinking about how it looks, but how it'll hold up over time.
It's all about making a product that's well made and feels good to use.
And taking it a step further, your sources talk about how the binding can be a branding tool, matching the notebook to the audience.
Oh yeah, that's where it gets interesting. A fancy hardcover notebook says something totally different from a basic spiral-bound one.
They break it down really well. Like, case binding is often seen as luxurious, perfect for executives or creative types.
In perfect binding, that's more modern and professional, good for educational materials or marketing stuff. Spiral binding is all about being practical for students or event planners.
And center sewn. That's got that unique handmade feel appealing to artists and writers. Then there's loose leaf, all about flexibility, great for offices and students.
So it's not just how the notebook works, it's also about the message it sends, the feeling it gives you.
It all ties together. So, to wrap things up, our deep dive into your sources has shown us that notebook binding is not just a small detail. It affects how the notebook works, how it looks, and even what it says about the brand. We've got those 5 main methods: spiral, case, perfect, center sewn, and loose leaf. Each one's got pros and cons, making them right for different people and situations.
What I think is so fascinating is how each method is about solving a different need. Whether you want that lay-flat convenience, that long-lasting durability, a clean look, or that super flexible option, the binding is key to how you use the notebook.
And for our listeners, we hope you've gotten a new appreciation for those notebooks you use every day. Next time you pick one up, think about all the thought that went into how it's put together. It's more than just paper and a cover.
Absolutely. And here's a question for you to ponder. Does the way something is made, not just a notebook, but anything, affect how much we value it? Think about a really well-made leather wallet versus a cheap plastic one. Do they feel different? Do we treat them differently? It's something to consider, how the construction of the things around us affects our perception of them.
Lots to think about. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Until next time.